My name is Vanessa Crow. I'm 52 years old, and I live the life that most only dream of. A penthouse in the center of Manhattan with a view of Central Park, a closet full of Givenchy and Louboutin, and a bank account that would make any Wall Street broker choke on their coffee. I earned everything myself, starting with a tiny real estate firm in Brooklyn, and now I own half of the elite houses in this city. My deals are discussed in Forbes, my parties, in the society pages. But you know what I've realized over the years? Wealth is cool, but without a spark in life, it's like champagne without bubbles. And the spark is given to me by two guys who don't even suspect the existence of each other. Lucas and Aiden, my little secrets, which I keep like rare diamonds. But something tells me that my perfect balance will soon crack. My first little secret is Lucas. He's 26, he's a former fitness trainer, with a body as if carved from marble. Tall, with dark curly hair, which he carelessly throws back, and brown eyes, in which something dangerous always smolders. I met him at the gym, where I went on a whim, deciding that it was time to tighten my figure. He was in a tight-fitting t-shirt, all sweaty, and when he smiled at me, I understood, this guy is mine. We started talking, and a week later he was already at my house, on my couch, with a bottle of Dom Perignon. I rented him an apartment in Chelsea, pay for his clothes, watches, even for his stupid photography courses, which he decided to take. Lucas is fire, passionate, impulsive, sometimes throws scenes if I don't answer his calls. But I even like it, his passion is like gasoline for my fire. He thinks he's my only one, and I'm in no hurry to dissuade him. The second one is Aiden. 24 years old, a model, with a face that could sell perfume without a single word. Blonde hair, always perfectly styled, blue eyes like the summer sky, and a smile that makes you want to take off everything, including common sense. I stumbled upon him at one of the parties in the Hamptons. He was in a white linen suit, sipping a cocktail, and looked as if he knew that all eyes were on him. I approached, started a conversation, and by morning he was already in my bed in the country house. Aiden is the complete opposite of Lucas. He's calm, refined, likes to talk about books and art, but under this mask, a guy who knows what he wants. I bought him a loft in Soho, pay for his trips to Milan and Paris for photo shoots, give him jewelry, which he wears with careless pride. Aiden thinks he's my main man, and I allow him to think so. He never throws scenes, but if I disappear for a couple of days, his messages become colder and his gaze sharper. I'm not going to choose between them. Why? I have money, power, and the desire to live the way I want. Lucas is fire, Aiden is a cool ocean. They are both mine, and I keep them at a distance from each other, like two expensive wines that aren't mixed in one glass. My life is a perfect balance. I meet Lucas on Mondays and Thursdays, with Aiden on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Sunday is for me spa, yoga, calls to my financial advisor. Everything is under control. I've learned to juggle deals for millions, two guys? PFF, it's like a warm-up before the real game. But even in a perfect life there are cracks, and I feel them appearing. It all started with a trifle. Lucas somehow dropped that he saw my Rolls Royce near some loft in Soho when I said I was flying to Chicago on business. I brushed it off, said it was my driver, but his eyes narrowed, like a cat that smelled a mouse. Aiden, in turn, began to ask questions about my evenings with girlfriends. He did it with a smile, but I know this tone, he suspects something. I didn't panic. I'm Vanessa Crow, I'm always one step ahead. But somewhere deep down I felt that my little house of cards could falter. My grip is still strong, but I know these boys aren't as simple as they seem. My best friend, Claire, once said over lunch in an expensive cocktail bar, "Vanessa, you're playing with fire." These boys are young. They have egos the size of your penthouse. If they find out about each other, there will be drama. I laughed, waved it off, ordered another martini, but her words stuck in my head. I'm not afraid of drama, I adore it, but I don't like losing control, and control is what I value most. Claire looked at me like a child who is reaching for matches, but I only smiled. Let her think what she wants. I know what I'm doing. That evening, I was sitting in my penthouse by the pool, looking at the lights of Manhattan. Lucas sent a message. Where are you, baby? I want to see you. A minute later came from Aiden. I miss you, Vanessa. Let's arrange a night just for us. I smiled, sent them both the same answer. Soon, darling. Busy. And yet something inside stirred. Not fear, no. Rather, anticipation. If my little secret is revealed, I will find a way to turn it to my advantage. I always do. But their messages are increasingly sounding like a challenge, and I know the game is getting dangerous. And damn it, I like it. I always thought that keeping two guys at a distance from each other is like managing a complex deal. You need to be one step ahead, feel every move, and not lose control. Lucas and Aiden, my fire and ocean, were my perfect assets, but their impatience began to tighten the strings of this game, and I knew that the balance that I had so carefully built could falter. And yet I wasn't afraid. I enjoyed it, like a glass of champagne, where every bubble promises a new taste. It all started when I went to Lucas in his loft in Chelsea. His apartment with brick walls and a view of the Hudson was like a stage for his daring energy. He met me in a black t-shirt. Dark curls fell on his forehead. Brown eyes burned with heat. I brought a bottle of wine. We sat on the couch, but his tone was sharper than usual. He talked about how rarely I appear now, how often I'm busy. You will find time for me, baby? He asked, and his voice was like a plea wrapped in passion. I laughed, touched his shoulder, said that business doesn't wait, but his hand lingered on my waist a little longer than necessary. He didn't suspect Aiden, but his impatience was like a spark ready to ignite. I left, throwing a casual soon, but in the elevator my heart was beating faster. Lucas was pulling me to him, and it was like a challenge that I accepted with a smile. A few days later, I found myself in a restaurant on the roof of a skyscraper, where the lights of Manhattan shone under the stars. Aiden was in a dark gray suit, blonde hair shone silver under the candlelight, blue eyes sparkled. We chatted about his photo shoots in Milan, about books, but between the lines slipped his desire, more meetings, more of me. You're too busy lately, he remarked, smiling, but with a slight shadow in his eyes. I squeezed his hand, joked that the world is not waiting, and he nodded, but his gaze lingered. Aiden didn't throw scenes like Lucas, but his words were like a light prick that you feel later. He wanted exclusivity, and it was like a wave gathering strength. The dinner ended with a walk on the terrace. His closeness was like a cool breeze, but I knew he's also starting to pull the rope. I left the restaurant and got into my Rolls-Royce, heading to Claire in a cocktail bar in the Upper East Side. The neon of the storefronts was reflected on the black varnish of the car as I raced through nighttime Manhattan, and thoughts swirled like smoke. Lucas and Aiden were becoming more insistent. Their desires collided like cars at an intersection. Lucas demanded passion. His messages burned. I miss you, baby, with a photo in the mirror where he was in one t-shirt. Aiden wrote less often, but his words were like art. Let's run away for the weekend. Just you and me. I answered briefly soon, darling, but felt the balance trembling. Chance coincidences only poured fuel on the fire. Lucas noticed my car in Soho when I was with Aiden, and I brushed it off, saying it was the driver, but his eyes narrowed, like a predator's. Aiden asked about evenings with girlfriends, and his smile was sharp as a blade. They didn't suspect each other, but their questions were like sparks ready to start a fire. I knew I was playing with fire, but damn it, I liked it. I turned this game to my advantage. As always, and while control was mine. In the cocktail bar, where crystal chandeliers and jazz created coziness, Claire was waiting with a glass of Cosmopolitan. Her eyebrows were raised, as if she already knew what I wanted to talk about. Rumors are creeping, Vanessa, she said, shaking her head. Someone saw me with a young handsome man in Chelsea, someone with another in Soho. I shrugged, ordered a martini, laughed, saying, gossip, what can you do about them? But she looked serious. They'll find out, and then what? She asked, and her voice was like a warning. We sat for several hours, chatting about me, about her her new projects, our old adventures. She talked about her last trip to Paris. I shared stories about deals, but the conversation inevitably returned to my boys. Claire shook her head, laughed, but her eyes were serious. She saw how thin the line I was balancing on was. I smiled, sipped a cocktail, said that everything was under control, but her words about the drama settled in my head. Control was my everything, and I wasn't going to lose it. Leaving Claire through. Take care of yourself, but I only winked. I knew what I was doing, but everything changed one evening. I was sitting in a bar in Soho where dim lights and velvet sofas created an intimate atmosphere. Aiden was next to me in a dark blue jacket, blonde hair perfectly styled, blue eyes sparkled. We were drinking cocktails. His hand touched mine when the doors of the bar swung open. Lucas entered in a black shirt. Dark curls fell on his forehead, brown eyes narrowed. He froze seeing Aiden. "Vanessa, and who is this next to you?" he asked, his voice trembling with surprise. Aiden turned, his smile disappeared. "I'm not the only one for you," he threw, and his tone cut like a blade. Their eyes darted, the air became thick, like before a storm. I looked at them, smiled, and said, "Boys, sit down. It's time to talk." Without looking back, I left, feeling their gazes, hot as flames, on my back. Looking at Lucas and Aiden, whose faces were burning with shock and anger, I felt how the game, which I had played with such precision, had reached its peak. They were sitting at a table in a Soho bar where dim light cast shadows on velvet sofas, and their gazes were like lightning, ready to strike. Lucas, dark curls falling on his forehead, brown eyes burning, clenched his fists. "Is this your boyfriend?" he growled. His voice was like a blow. Aiden, blonde hair perfect, blue eyes cold, added, "You slept with him? Seriously?" Their accusations poured down like sparks, but I leaned back on the sofa, keeping calm. "I am not your property," I said. My voice was firm as granite. "I need you both." Lucas hit the table. The glass trembled. "You have to choose now," he demanded. Aiden, looking with icy confidence, said, "I will not stay if there is him." Their ultimatums were like a challenge, but I wasn't going to give in. I smiled, stood up and threw, "Tomorrow, 8 p.m., club in the center. Be there." Without looking back, I left, feeling their gazes, hot like flames, on my back. I got into my Rolls Royce, heading home, and while the lights of Manhattan flickered outside the window, thoughts flowed like a river. Lucas and Aiden were furious. Their egos were cracking like ice under their feet, but I knew that I was holding everything in my hands. Lucas, with his fiery passion, wanted to burn everything that stood between us, but his life, the loft, the courses, his audacity, was my gift. Aiden, with his refined coldness, thought he could set conditions, but his blue eyes betrayed he wouldn't leave. They would come to the club because this game was mine, and I set the rules. I leaned back in the seat, looking at the neon of the storefronts, reflected on the black varnish of the car, and felt excitement, as before an important deal. At home, I went to the panoramic window, looking at the shimmering Manhattan. The phone was lying on the table, but I gave them time to comprehend what had happened. I sent 2 messages, 8 p.m., club. Don't be late. The answers came quickly. Lucas, I will be. Aiden, okay. Their brevity was like an acknowledgement that they were already on the hook. I poured myself a glass of champagne, raising it and looking at the city, felt that the next evening would seal my success. Lucas and Aiden could be angry, but they would come. The next evening, I drove up to a club in the center of Manhattan where leather sofas and dim light in the VIP area created an atmosphere of power. Lucas and Aiden were already waiting at a secluded table. Their tension was like an electric current. Lucas, in a black shirt, dark curls disheveled, brown eyes blazing. Aiden, in a dark blue suit, blonde hair shining, blue eyes were calm, but with a shadow of doubt. I sat opposite, looking at them with a slight smile. Aiden spoke first. His voice was even, but firm. "When you left yesterday, we stayed at the bar. sat, talked, and decided that we are ready to be with you together. Lucas nodded, his brown eyes still sparkled, but he added, "We are not thrilled, but you are different." We agree. Their words were like an admission of defeat, but with a touch of challenge, and I felt my heart beat faster. It was their step towards me, but the game remained mine. I leaned back, my voice was commanding, like a queen dictating a decree. Correct decision, because I want you both. Stay, keep this life. Leave, lose everything. They exchanged glances, their gazes softened, and I knew they were mine. I stood up, leaving them at the table, and went out. I decided to walk through Central Park, where the evening light cast long shadows on the paths. The leaves rustled underfoot, the cool air refreshed, and I thought about Lucas and Aiden, whose agreement in the club was my success. They accepted my rules, their anger turned into submission, and it was better than any contract. The truth came out, but instead of chaos, it made everything clearer. Now they knew that they were playing by my terms, and I felt that this moment was just the beginning of a new stage. I stopped at the pond, looking at the reflection of the lights, and smiled. After that evening in the club, where Lucas and Aiden agreed to play by my rules, I felt how life filled with lightness. Their decision to be with me together opened a new freedom where I could be myself, without choosing. Their submission in that VIP area was my happiness, not just their presence, but how I directed them remaining in the center. I decided to test them and arranged a party on a yacht in New York Harbor where the lights of skyscrapers shone like stars. Lucas and Aiden were there. Their tension was like a slight current. Lucas, in a black shirt, dark curls tossed by the wind, brown eyes sparkled with audacity. Aiden, in a white jacket, blonde hair shining, blue eyes were calm, but with a slight smile. I danced with Lucas, his hands on my waist burned like a flame. Then with Aiden, his movements were smooth as a wave. The guests whispered, but I caught only their gazes full of desire, but subordinate to me. The three of us stood on the deck, drank champagne, and their laughter mingled with the sound of water. This was my happiness, not just their presence, but how I directed their energy. The yacht sailed, the city sparkled, and I knew that this moment was mine. When the yacht returned to the harbor, I felt a surge of confidence. That night showed that everything is going according to my plan. A few days later, I met with Claire in our favorite cocktail bar in the Upper East Side, where crystal chandeliers and jazz created coziness. She sat with a glass of Cosmopolitan, her eyebrows were raised. "You really did it," she said, shaking her head, but in her voice there was admiration. We chatted for hours, laughed, remembered old adventures, but the conversation inevitably returned to Lucas and Aiden. Claire wondered how I keep them both, and I only shrugged, ordering another martini. Claire raised her glass, her smile was sincere, and we clinked glasses. After the bar, I decided to take a walk, and my legs led me to the Manhattan waterfront. I stood, looking at the Hudson, where the lights of the city were reflected in the water like a scattering of stars. Lucas and Aiden were part of my life, each adding something of their own passion, calmness, a spark. I didn't choose between them because I could have everything, and that was my happiness. Claire, the city, the rumors, all this was the background for my world, where I decided how it would be next. Life was bright, full of opportunities, and I knew that new adventures were waiting around the corner. I smiled, feeling the wind from the river caressing my face.